our next presenter. So, colleagues, it is a pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Ms. Oksana Smorzhevska. She is the PhD in history. She's the associate professor of the New History of Ukraine at Taras Shevchenko Kiev National University. The field of her research interest covers neo-paganism in Ukraine, religious and church life in Ukraine, postmodern Ukraine, as well as commemoration practices in the modern historical culture and politics. And today, Oksana will tell us about happy places of memory, cultural meanings, and emotional fulfillment, which is extremely timely. Over to you. Thank you so much, Svetlana. Welcome, colleagues. I'd like to say that after such an amazing presentation, I'm actually slightly anxious because I'm more modest at your slides, but I will try to make my presentation as interesting as possible. Now, I'd like to say that when I was listening to the previous speaker, I was trying to draw the parallels with my research when speaking about the happy memory places. There was a tragic story of the composer's life about Ukraine in early 20th century. But at the same time, in the present day, we are still trying to look for some positive things even despite the war ongoing. Creating the places of happiness, Sitina. Your exhibitions, your presentation are basically also one of such happy places of memory that are bringing together people, representatives of certain professions around such important, meaningful things for us, for our self-identification, for our self-presentation. And this is what my research is dedicated to: happy places of memory, cultural meanings, and emotional fulfillment. And please give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my slides? Yes, we can. Let me try opening it full screen. How about now? For some reason it doesn't. Oh, okay. Now it should be full screen. Yeah, it is. It is. Thank you. Okay. So, back in the day, Italian politician Massimo Torelli, an author, said, "We created Italy. Now it is the time to create Italians." i.e., creating a state, a unified state, does not mark the end of creating a political nation. Among other things, you have to also create some cultural meanings and senses. And this is basically something that we're also going through to a certain extent now. And many of you have heard that now is the time when Ukrainians are being shaped as a political nation. A French historic, Gerrit Laurent, when talking about the French history, to understand the ties with the past and creating the present, they said that with the Third Republic being installed, this tie became incredibly important because history turned into an important nerve of the social and political connection. In my opinion, these words are also relevant currently for Ukraine and for those cultural senses that all of us are creating. And in the first place, I'm talking about the representatives of humanitarian science. And a very important role is played by these places of memory. And this is what was suggested by Pierre Nora. And according to him, according to his interpretation, when we're talking about places of memory, we can talk about different objects, about archives, museums, the monuments, cemeteries, memorials, symbolical ones, pilgrimage, parades, functional ones, memoirs, biographies, textbooks. Philosopher and writer Vladimir Yermolenko also gave a definition to places of memory. As he wrote back in the day, the main role of places of memory is to record the totality of history in the collective conscious or even unconscious, and therefore stop forgetting. Make something that is mortal immortal. And the modernization of the 20th century contributed to the change of collective memory. Here we're talking about urbanization, migration, revolutionary events, wars, repressions, famines, dramatic social change. All of that was cutting usual family ties, this connection to the family places, and it was erasing memories about people, places, etc. And therefore the need came up, the need to somehow cover the gaps in time, to create the spots of collecting all of these memories. And in the present day world, it is not even material things that become these places of memory, but are more symbolic ones. For example, for France, what is related to the symbol of freedom, or the world-renowned picture by Willy Brandt when he's kneeling down before the memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto as the symbol of liability for their past. Back in the day, by the way, Willy Brandt in Germany was persecuted for his anti-Hitler views, so he is not directly or indirectly related to the Nazi crimes, but he is a representative of an entire nation, assumed the responsibility and symbolically kneeled down before that memorial. And let us move on. Here you can see some theory. I think, though, for those who are interested, they can read all of that in detail. Also, I would like to emphasize on one unusual cultural things that became the business card in Ivankiv, Kiev Oblast. It is called the Egg of Life. Ivankiv is located in the northern Kiev Oblast. This is a small Ryan center. It used to be Ryan center. Now it is a part of Vyshhorod Rayon after the administrative reform. But the monument is still there. And this Egg of Life demonstrates how the cultural senses change and what is the emotions that are embedded into it. This egg, the Egg of Life, stems back from the Chernobyl disaster that happened on April 26, 1986. And for people from Ivankiv, Chernobyl disaster is a very important part of their life and their memory, both symbolically as well as practically. Back in the day, this settlement was a place where people who were forced to be displaced after the explosion at the nuclear power plant stayed. Also, the so-called partisans, the people who were liquidating this Chernobyl disaster, also went through Ivankiv. And aside from the standard commemoration practice, such as official speeches on the anniversary of the tragedy, and various events organized in schools, libraries, at the enterprises, opening monuments. There is also a monument to Viktor Kibenok, who is one of the firefighters, who basically was one of the first to fight the fire. Sadly, he died. And his family used to live in Ivankiv back in the day. There is also the memorial plaque on the house where he used to reside. There is a street named after Mr. Kibenko. So people know who he is, they remember him. Also, this very untypical format of commemoration draws attention. This is a huge concrete made sculpture that is egg-shaped. It is huge. Well, proportion-wise, it's like 1.5 to 2 average people put on top of each other. So this sculpture is located at the crossroads of several roads, 25 kilometers from Chernobyl and it exclusion zone, and it was put up in 2000s, and this is his present to the locals, which symbolizes the life being reborn, because there's a life inside of an egg, and inside of this egg there is a surprise. There is the capsule of time, a message of the school children to the new generations and their local legends as to when it should be opened, 100 years from now, or maybe 200 years from now. Nobody knows for sure. So for quite some time, for several decades, this egg was associated only with the Chernobyl disaster. It became the place that everyone knows here. So people would say, so where are we gonna meet? Let's meet near the egg. You see people decorated it. It was decorated with flowers and bow ties and the Ukraine's flag colors. This is how this egg was decorated for Easter in 2014. And every year it was decorated in a different way. This is a local initiative. People are doing that out of their own free will. No one forces them to do that. This became, so to say, local ritual. But let us go back to the change of cultural senses. As I have already said, Ivankiv is located in the north of Kyiv Oblast and pretty close to the border with Belarus, and it basically was occupied by the Russian troops during the first hours of the full-scale invasion on February 24. And the occupation lasted until April 1st, 2022. And as of March 4, all of the settlements were fully cut from internet connection, mobile coverage. It was not known what was happening there. And in just a few days, Ivankiv and all surrounding villages were covered by the dark times of occupation and what was done by the Russian troops. And over this 36 days of occupation, in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, they left an unbelievably scary experience of survival in the minds of the people. And one of such material and symbolical ways to show that is applying new things to the previous tragedies. For example, the already mentioned Chernobyl disaster. And what is the point of this new census? Here we're talking about these events, about this egg, and here is where the first battle for Kiev took place. There are some videos. They are still available online, and professional videos. And after the liberation, around this egg, the new memory landscapes were created. First and foremost, on February 24, 2023 already, in the vicinity of an egg, a symbolical plaque was installed. This is what it looked like in the first days after the occupation. Here you can see the cross and the icon, and it marks that this is the place where a year ago the two columns of the orcs, one that was coming from Polisa, the other coming from Chernobyl direction, they were supposed to merge and already merged go and take over our capital city. However, as the column coming from Polisa was held back by our soldiers, the column from Chernobyl had to wait and basically had to spend the night there. And according to the military experts, this night played a crucial role in this war and basically destroyed the plans to rapidly invade Kiev. And this, holding them back, gave the time to our armed forces to fight back, to repel the attack. And the locals initiated on social media to purchase flowers, lavender bushes, and they planted flower beds surrounding the egg to remind about those events as a symbol of continuous life, of people getting together, planting plants, taking care of them. In front of us, before our eyes, the new Canaan of the collective memory was shaped. That is not associated with the Chernobyl disaster that much, but rather is associated with the events of the first hours and first days of the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine. And this place also has become the landscape of memory about the first battle for Kiev's defense. And as the locals say, the egg is already a pretty unique monument. But now, on top of that, this is a place that marks where the first battle for Kiev happened. This place is unique in the country. There is no such other place. And that is why it should be respected. And basically, people want this place to be well maintained so that it would remind about those events. So basically, we see that in the modern world, it is the memory, not the history, that turns into the broadcaster of the historical event, some historical tradition. And it is important to emphasize that the place of the memory is the thing becomes like that only when it commemorates the victims of Holodomor, famine, political persecution, and as a rule, the places of memory are related to tragic, traumatizing historical events.
Окрім трагічних, звернутися до
And now I suggest to switch from the sites of mourning to the sites of happy memories. And I suggest us to focus on the positive historic events, which make us feel proud for the accomplishments and achievements that took place in the past. We can look for such happy events in our past, but this search should be combined with the personal experience. For my students, I ask them to perform the task to make a list of their happy sites of memory, and then to share this information with the rest of the class. My students are usually young people, and their memories are usually related to their childhood memories. Somehow, all of them tell about the trips to grandma, and we see certain changes as now they are saying that their happy places of memories changed, and now they are talking about the first days of the beginning of the full-scale invasion, when they had to grow up very quickly. They were feeling happy because they were able to survive. They tell me that they managed to pull themselves together, and they were able to push through. So to have such happy places of memory, a certain trip could be arranged or a tour, but it could be combined with some activities, not just the local history tour, but maybe a picnic. In such a way, individuals will shape their own memories, and collective memories are shaped by the set of individual memories. There is the need to shape a collective memory on certain events in order to form national or cultural identity. The places of memory are of utmost importance. Unfortunately, usually they are of tragic character or nature. Therefore, we need also to have the happy places of memory that would be associated with some happy events, events that united the community. Some tourist sites come, could also be or could become such happy places of memory. For instance, the miniatures, these small sculptures in Kyiv. For instance, the sculptures to jam, the sculpture to the first tram, the sculpture to Kyiv cake, and this is a small sculpture letter Y. And if you polish it, you are as if protecting the language. Why is this culture unique? Because this letter is unique in Ukrainian language, and it is located on the wall of the Kiev University that was hit by the Russian missile. The investigation is still in progress with regard to the person who was informing the Russian troops carrying out this attack. And you also see that these dots on the letter have some parts in glass, and those are the parts of the glass that was shattered during that attack. Another interesting mini sculpture, this is the ghost of Kiev. I believe we all remember that at the end of February 2022, at the beginning of spring that year, we were following the events that were related to this figure. There were many legends associated with this person, but unfortunately, the pilot, the Ghost of Kiev, died in June 2022, and only a couple of months later, he was buried. He is from Bucha, and we see that there are many interesting senses behind this sculptures. And although these memories are tragic, they give us the feeling of pride, and they give us inspiration. Such people give us inspiration. This combination of happy places of memory and the sites of mourning, uh, this is another step in shaping the positive worldview in Ukrainians. I believe that this is the right format, looking for the sites of happy memories that would help us also in terms of civic education and patriotic education, not just to tick some boxes on the checklist, but actually to bring children starting from the school age. This is the way to educate and to foster love to their language and to their history. Unfortunately, this effort has been overlooked for years, and we know the outcome. I'm sorry for being so emotional. It's just these events resonate with my personal experience as well. I don't know if you can see it. If not, I will send the photo in the chat box later. As I mentioned previously, within the framework of my study, I am the organizer of the students' conference that is called the Commemorative Practices for the Russian-Ukrainian War. This conference was already held on November 10. During that conference, I wanted to hear from our students about the commemorative practices and the views of Ukrainian students on that. All of them mentioned one thing, and maybe this is just due to the fact that they are so young, but they are very much interested in commemoration of those who died, those who passed away. For instance, one of my students is running marathons to commemorate her friend now deceased. Another student of mine is a fan of Dmytro Kostovailo from Da Vinci regimen.
Серед школярів
And
фонд
in
розвитку
future, she
мистецьких
wants
предметів
to
в визначальному
start
центрі
the small scholarship program for the school students, the scholarship for fine arts. And she wants this
Тобто
effort to be continued.
покоління обирає дію, а не статичність.
Young generation chooses this kind of actions to commemorate. They don't want to have something tangible and immovable. Thank you very much, Oksana, for your brilliant presentation, and thank you for bringing up this sensitive issue. I'm sure our colleagues will take part in discussion now. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions to Oksana, or do you have any comments in terms of commemorative practices? Petra, please go ahead. Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for this presentation. I have a following question. Who has initiated this commemoration of these recent events? Who is taking the lead in this type of effort? Is it the local government or is this the initiative of civic activists or society organizations? Thank you for your question. Well, it's all combined. You can see the photo on the brochure, and you see that the posters, the billboards, and the plaques were installed to commemorate the one of our citizens, Alexander Matsievsky. If I'm not mistaken, another monument to him was opened in Nizhyn a couple of days ago. If it is a proper monument, it means that this is the initiative of the local government, as it costs a lot. Another commemorative practice is the flower bed with flags in Kiev. And if I'm not mistaken, the relatives of the deceased members of Azov regiment were participating in this effort. They were bringing their flags to the flower beds. Some of these places are on the spot, some are well thought through, and this kind of initiatives are not new for us, as starting from 2014, such actions have already been taken. For instance, the Maidan, which became the scene for the shooting of Ukrainians, was also filled with flowers and was also used as the place for commemoration. And maybe some of you were watching the Game of Thrones, and a throne was made of the remnants of the shells. There are various means to commemorate. There are official events and unofficial events. Recently, I have read that Kiev Pечерsk Lavra will have their bells ringing as the commemoration of the deceased Ukrainian military. We see that there are many efforts in this regard. Murals are also very popular right now, as the practice of commemoration murals is another way to commemorate certain events. Thank you. Thank you, Petra, for your question. Thank you, Oksana, for responding. Dear colleagues, go ahead. While our colleagues are thinking, I was making notes while listening to your presentation. You mentioned the upbringing of the younger generation, and I was thinking about the recent news. Yanina Sokolova told us about it. She mentioned some new TV series that was filmed in Russia and is becoming more popular in Ukraine. It is about crime. I do not remember the title of this series, but I am still taken aback by the fact that 10 years after the beginning of the war and during the second year of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian youth is still watching this kind of content. Dear colleagues, do you have the answer to the question, how can we bring up this new generation in the spirit of patriotism? How can we, as the researchers, help and contribute in terms of educating new generation? Dear colleagues, this is not just a question to Ms. Oksana, this is a question to everyone.
Ну, щодо того, хто має
If you
плекати
don't mind, I would like to start.
мені здається, що в першу чергу
The
це
upbringing and education. I believe that it all starts with the family, as a family is of an authority to a child and to a young person. And then there is the state policy and history education, civic education,
знанні Конституції, фінансової грамотності,
history classes at
формування
school as well.
громадянина патріота в хорошому сенсі
But
патріота. На жаль,
when we speak about the patriotism and the sense of patriotism, usually it was not properly taught at school. It was taught at the Soviet manner. But the situation is changing. A parent of one of my students came to me. He is serving in Ukrainian army, and he saw Ukrainian students singing the song "Brother in Ar" of his of the composer who is called "Brother in Arms." I see the response of children to this music, and it is actually important. The song is called Brother in Arms, and children are very much fans of it. This series that you mentioned, I haven't watched it myself, but I read some reviews. And one of the opinions was that how come that you adults are now complaining about the younger generation now if you just a couple of years ago were watching yourselves Russian TV series. They are just a continuation of your actions. I don't know where this series could be watched. Is it available online or is it available somewhere else? I know that it was available on YouTube, or maybe it was removed. I don't know. You know, I was scared that Ukrainian TV channels were broadcasting this series. I'm happy that that is not the case. So how can we counter such a series or such phenomena? By such efforts that I mentioned, for instance, the conference that I mentioned, as the students do not see us as people in authority. They want to see adults as the partners. They want to have a dialogue. And we need to take that into proper consideration since this new generation means that they have new views. Each generation is a new generation, and it means that this is a new era. We have to be more flexible. We have to show that we deserve their admiration, and we need to shape the right values.
Дуже дякую, пані Оксано. Дякую.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Alexandra, do you have a question or would you like to comment? Please go ahead. I have both a question and a comment. Thank you. First, thank you, Oksana, for such an, I understand what is such an emotionally overwhelming presentation, especially if you have to go back to the memories of very scary events. I'll start with a question and I'll then make my comment. So the last thing that were mentioned by Oksana, I'll first go with the comment and my vision, because I also had to work a lot with the students during the extracurricular activities as an administrator and organizer. And yes, you have to engage them as much as possible. You have to jointly engage them. As in leadership, you have to basically lead by an example. You have to keep them interested, but without our participation, without our position, without us being next to them. Let me give an example. Last year, in 2023, but last academic year, at the Dali Art Academy, we did the project in Ahmedabad Hospital. And when everyone is so pumped up, and Svetlana knows about that project as well, because they also supported us. We basically, I personally was also drawing together with the students, even though I'm not an artist. So you have to be as engaged as possible. And of course, upbringing and, you have to show it to children. Well, this is not about higher education. You have to develop the humanitarian policy, and aside from inside the family, yeah, I agree 100%. You have to start that at the preschool level, because this is when the understanding is shaped. To be honest, well, this is not an envy, but our enemy is so good at building ideological policy. To a certain extent, we should probably even learn from them, because this is what they started the activity from in the occupied territories, and they also are paying a lot of attention to that at home. So engagement,
Тобто гуманітарна
and
політика.
of course, developing humanitarian policy in the state and education with relevant programs, starting with the preschool education. And here's my question. Towards the end of your presentation, you have mentioned Dmytro Kotsubailo's scholarship in art. Are there already any agreements, maybe with the educational institutions? Because I don't know, maybe I could also be an ambassador, because I know people in this area, and I could also help you find partners, philanthropists, because the memorial mentioned by you in Nizhyn, well, clearly there was support from local authorities, but from what I know, it was installed using private funds. Anton Harashenko participated in that, from what I know. And the architect was a teacher of Salvador Dali Modern Art Academy, Jana Balanyuk. She was the one who designed it, and thank God it was implemented. So the question is, do you already have some agreements, or do you maybe need some help with that? Thank you so much, Alexandra. No, no agreements yet. She only mentioned this dream, and if things work out, she would like Dmytro's wish to be turned into life, to continue doing what he used to do during the peaceful times. So potentially we can keep in touch, yes, and we can start talking about that because we can engage Maria Primachenko Foundation. Her great granddaughter is very active now, so I think we can reach out to them. By the way, thank you so much about mentioning about that foundation. I haven't even thought about it. Didn't even cross my mind. Yeah. They are implementing lots of charity projects at the moment. And of course, commercial ones too, but I think you could try doing that because I think that it is a very important thing that needs to be implemented. Because, for example, I didn't know that he liked drawing. Yeah, here, by the way, in this book, there are pictures of his drawings back from his school days. You know, he's Da Vinci for a reason. Yeah, but Da Vinci was good not only in drawing. Yeah. He was a genius in many multiple domains. So yeah, because any creative person can be called Da Vinci, you know, a creator, so to say. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Let's keep in touch. Thank you so much. Thank you for this collaboration, for ideas. Alex, if you have any ideas, then please jump in. Lisa, go ahead. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the presenters, both of them. It was a pleasure listening to both of them. And this is not a question, but rather a remark. As you said, Svetlana, that such commemorative practice and such places of strength can be not only geographical places, but also some art projects that one way or another have to do with memory about people and some events. Haven't you thought that probably it is worth engaging in music and lyrics? Because there are certain lyrics that unite generations. They bring back memories about a terrible event that happened to us in the past, to express in them. And I am now working on a project that is called Carols and Christmas Songs of the World. We understand that aside from the lyrics of carols that touched upon war events that are known back from the King's times, there are also modern texts, and we know that last year with the carol called Oh There in Bakhmut, and it was composed by Plastitisky, who dedicated it to his brother in arms who died in Bakhmut. And there are multiple such carols, and they also are such memory points that should remind all Ukrainians about certain events that occur in the songs. And it is pretty interesting that this kind of carol lyrics also can be found starting in 2014, in 2017, 2019, and 2023. And they're pursued by Ukrainians on the one hand as some old tags, but at the same time as something new, even though they might have been composed 5 to 7 years ago, but people started listening to them only recently and started looking at them from a different angle only after February 24, 2022. This is true. Lyrics and music pieces are all part of commemorative practice. But it is important to understand what it is about. That is not simply a carol, but a carol about the events that happened in Bakhmut, so that people would sing it every year. Then it will turn into something that commemorates. Thank you so much. In the framework of this project, I'm preparing a guidebook, and I'm planning to mention it, and it would be extremely nice of you if you could share it with me so that I can provide it as an example of commemoration in modern day. Do you already have some publications, or are you still working on it? You're on mute. Lisa? Oh, something happened with my sound. Can you hear me now? The thing is that, for example, there in Bakhmut, Carol, there is a researcher, Lilia Remka in Lviv, who has already found several versions. So we can already say that it has been various versions of it has been created by people. And I want to say that I started working on the project that's for the world on December 1st because I work on folklore, but I'm interested in that because it demonstrates, so to say, customs and traditions that during the war demonstrate certain threads that are tying us with the mid last century. These carols that were composed a few years ago are seen as something rebellious. It shows that this line, the senses, these meanings, they basically are being transferred from one decade to another. Yeah, they're becoming relevant again. I remembered one more song, the first insurgent song that you have probably also heard. And I'm sorry, colleagues, could you please mute your mic? See, we're talking about the growing generation, and the growing generation jumps in immediately. So he recorded that song after he heard it from his grandfather, his late grandfather, who was the soldier in the Ukrainian insurgent army. It was also very relevant. It also mentioned the word Moskali. I hope we're not going to get banned for using this word here. And we're saying that when people hear this and they think that it's a few decades, they demonstrate this historical memory, no matter how much they're trying to eradicate it. Thank you so much, Oksana. Ludmila, go ahead. Good evening, good morning, colleagues. I have one comment and one question. Svetlana, regarding your take on bringing up or raising this patriotism, I would like to say that I signed up for April and I'm preparing for the presentation, which will be dedicated to this upbringing process, but I want to bring it back by teaching. So raising by teaching. And as a person who does translation, I would like to share my experience on how translation in education, not of the growing generation, that we have just heard some words from, that can stimulate, can develop and improve certain things, because it may seem that it should be happening on its own, but no, this is a very complex matter and you have to work on it. Even despite such a complicated situation, there won't be interest to learning or patriotism given the past in our country. You cannot change it overnight. You cannot raise that in children overnight. So I think by means of teaching people, by means of using certain subjects, you at least can try raising that in them. And responding to Svetlana's question, and Oksana, thank you so much for today's presentation. I did literature studies and I do translation as a side activity, as most people who do literature studies. And I wanted to ask you about the following thing, about the collective individual memory, basically about the commemorative practice. There are multiple different practices. Of course, I read Hypox and all of that, but I wrote one article, and this is basically where my question stems from. There was one writer Thomas Nashville, and his novel is called The Unfortunate Traveler. It has not been translated to Ukrainian. I tried doing something, I tried researching it, and in this piece, the war, it's like our modern situation. There is seen through the prism of the war that happened 100 years ago. So the author focuses on it and draws conclusions regarding this war or revolution, permanent insurgent practice that back in the day during Elizabeth's time happened in the Renaissance England. And he reaches a conclusion that you should talk about war in a conscious way many years after it's over. Then we process this information, 100 years passed, and then we can draw conclusions. But this is an artistic thought from literature. But yes, you can see the author's opinion, even though he expressed it via one of the characters who had to do with England's history. Therefore, my question is, how do you think this non-material process commemoration in our situation, is it a time for it? Is it timely now? Or maybe something else needs to happen? Well, I don't know. Historians can tell you about that. So, do we already have enough time for that, or shall we wait for a little bit more time? Oftentimes, and I'm talking about my student years, the teachers told us that studying memoirs that were written by the historians who participated in the Ukrainian Revolution in the 17th and 1917 and 1920, you cannot do, because they were very emotional when describing it all. And I think this basically responds to your question. Now, we have to record it all, to document it all. But you have to look at it once again in an emotion-free way sometime later. Because if we're talking about the events that happened during Bogdan Khmelnytsky days, do not pain and hurt us that much, because it happened a long time ago. But now, when we are a part of it, when we're living through that, of course, we have a very different perception. For example, for many people, the war started after February 24. And when you tell someone about 2014, they're like, well, that happened a long time ago. Sadly, there are people like that who are saying that it has happened somewhere far away. So there will be a more pragmatic approach to all of that. And we will have to still live next to these people. Sadly, you cannot pick your neighbor as a country, and we have to also take that into account. And now we are very emotional, but who knows what's gonna happen in 10, 20 years. So it is not yet the time for thinking about it in a calm way, but yes, it is important now for us, researchers, scholars, and artists, to document it all. Look at how many various artistic things are happening in various domains. People who are creative, they sense it in a more delicate way, in a more subtle way. So it's important to document it with the help of essays, art, drawings, paintings, broadcasting, language. And later on, we're going to put it all in order, and then the approach will change completely. Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you. And a wonderful comment by Larissa Kisuk, right? Go ahead. Oh, could you please read it out loud? Thank you. I wanted to be brief and to express the gratitude to Oksana. The topic is very deep, very important, and I simply express some of my emotions in the comment. And I wrote that for me personally, and for probably many people, the strongest places for us are the ones that go back into the depth of history, because they have their own history. They're ancient. And back in the day, when traveling across Kiev Oblast, I saw the memory to the king of ants at the godly hill. And I think the king's name was Bozhidar or something of that kind, one of the gods in the 4th century. And it seems to be a monument that doesn't draw much attention, but I understand that these are our ancestors. Probably thanks to that victory, we are here today. And what you have been talking about, this unbelievable monument to the egg at this crossroads, because crossroads is also a symbol, an ancient symbol, a very important one. And here you have an egg, which is a symbol of the world creation, the same as писанка, and here it's white, it's clean, and you can also interpret it in a different way. And I realized that people have put up the cross and Lady Mary is there, and various Christian symbols are amplifying each other, and these symbols have been put up in such an important place. You know, everyone will look at it from their own perspective. And here we're talking about various tragic events, war, Chernobyl disaster, and at the same time understand that police is one of the most ancient Slavic lands where the Polisa dialects were preserved after Chernobyl, and some of the oldest cultural artifacts were preserved too. So this basically is such a deep topic and an exhaustive topic. And talking about raising and bringing up young generation, it is also interrelated. And here's this power of Shadrach, because I'm saying that this is such an old, such an archaic carol that is such a simple but known to anyone that carries force. And then Pavacha is like a sculptor. He turned it into a masterpiece. And I don't remember which of the critics called it a small symphony. When such the in-depth things become the core that is used to raise and upbring the youth, I think that young people can sense and feel this kind of things. That all of the unimportant things, they will go away, but what is deep in there will stay. And when the war started in 2014 and then onwards, many young people, there were bands, there were projects, they were interested in a renaissance of the traditional Ukrainian song, culture, from embroidered shirts to clay pot making. And I think that this is the foundation that matters for bringing up children and youth. Thank you. Sorry. Maybe my thoughts were confused, but thanks to you, these thoughts crossed my mind. Thank you so much, and Oksana, thank you so much for such a relevant and important topic, such an emotional one. It is very much needed. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the floor today. Colleagues, sadly, our time is up. And I would like to once again thank our amazing speakers for impeccable presentations today. Such relevant, such in-depth, such emotional ones. And I'd like to thank all those who joined us today. I'd like to thank our interpreters. Glory to Ukraine. Have a nice week. And do not forget that on Thursday, we have presentations by Mariana and Allah. Thank you.
Героям слава і до
Glory to
побачення.
the heroes. Goodbye.
До вечора, до побачення.
Have a quiet evening. Goodbye.
До побачення.
Bye-bye.
Дякую, дякую.
До побачення, дякую.
Побачення.